All right, everybody, this is Chris with Drop Dice, so I'm back with you again. This was supposed to be Wednesday's video. Unfortunately, it is about 12:30 my time for Thursday, 12:30 a.m. Unfortunately, I had a little bit of a late start. For those of you who were kind of paying attention to my statuses, I had some family business that I needed to attend to, so I kind of went internet dark for the last couple days. For those of you that are close to me and you want to know what's going on, you can feel free to ask. I don't mind talking about it, but I feel like that's not really something for this channel. So thank you guys for kind of patiently waiting for this video. Inside this one, we're going back to world building. I know last week I talked about going off camera. Originally, I started recording this one, or sorry, not off camera, off Google Hangouts. Originally, I started recording this one and I didn't like where it was going without the Google Hangout. So we're going to keep it up again. However, I am going to do something a little different this time. Give me just 1 second here. Because I don't typically do this. And I don't know why, to be honest. But since I am recording, let me go ahead and throw my logos up and all that stuff. Those of you that are on my channel normally, you know all this stuff. Again, I am Chris Wilhelm from Drop Dice. So if you're interested in making an overlay like this, I just wanted to let everybody know Lloyd Collins, or Jarl DM as he's known on Google, he talks about how to make these. It's very easy. They're quick to write up. If you happen to have Photoshop, it's actually the easiest. If you have GIMP, the instructions are basically the same, just GIMP calls things a little bit different names on there. But I just kind of wanted to show you guys this just real quick here. Let's see here. Let me go ahead and turn that off again. All right, so now that we've got the introductions and stuff out of the way, I did want to mention that Tuesday, I had a chance to play Fate Core for the first time. It was actually a lot of fun. If you haven't had a chance to play it, it was actually pretty easy to pick up. The book felt a little daunting to me. However, when we started playing, it was actually really simple. I think the book almost overanalyzes itself, because once we started playing, it was kind of shoot from the hip. We had a real dynamic combat. If you guys check out my likes section, or my liked videos section, there should be a link for a Mad Max Fate Accelerated game. That's what we played. I got to play a violent bastard named Squirrel, who ended up killing a bunch of people with a car and then finished off a dude with a machete. It was a ton of fun. And I think I'm probably going to try a Fate Accelerated game next, since I don't have any real experience with Fate. Just to kind of get out there and try some other games. We talked about it in a previous video. If you don't normally go out and try some of these games, when you see them posted on the one-shot group, if you have any sort of interest, talk to the GM. A lot of GMs are open to new players, and if they're a GM like me, I like new players, in the sense that I can show them what I like about the game. For me, it's like story time at being in kindergarten. But that's all kind of what's been going on with me here. Let's go ahead and jump into the world building session here. Let me open something up real quick here, and then we will get all set. So this week we're talking about the Garuda. I mentioned it during the brainstorm video, and I've kind of talked about it since. The Garuda, for some reason, I really like the bird people. I'm thinking I'm going to keep calling them the Garuda, at least for now. It'll probably be like the world. I'll probably just call it something like, in the case of the world, I called it Flood World for a long time, until I finally felt comfortable with the name, which is now Stratmur. So for now, we're going to go with Garuda. I may change that, and you're going to notice that inside my notes, I'm going to call them like sub-races, really basic terms. For me, naming things is kind of the hardest part, because I like that names have weight and value. So that usually ends up being the last thing that I do on character sheets, the last thing I do with world building. So just kind of bear with me if you guys get used to hearing Garuda and I end up sticking with it, awesome. If not, they may change to be like pigeon toes or something ridiculous. For my normal players that usually make me stick with a ridiculous suggestion, I'm not doing that, just to let you guys know. However, let's kind of jump right in on this one. So I'm going to open up OneNote. Just as a quick discussion point here, if you've never used OneNote, I talked about it during the GM Tavern about how I use it all the time for for campaign building and things like that. As we build this, I will probably put together a OneNote document that has the races and stuff like that inside there. Once the campaign world fully fleshes out, at least to a playable to a playable point, what I'll probably do is put together a OneNote, throw it online, and let anybody who's been following along go ahead and get access to that. Because if you like what I'm doing, I mean, there's no point for me to just kind of squirrel away my world and do all these videos about what it's about and then never do anything with it. So if it turns out that you like what's going on in these videos, we'll go ahead and put that available for everybody. Now let's go ahead and do some screen sharing here. Okay. All right, so let me pull this real quick here and shift that over. All right, guys, thanks for bearing with me. I use 2 monitors, and so sometimes it gets a little backed up. So what we're seeing right here is this is the OneNote system that I was talking about before. Just as a quick overview, if you missed the GM's Tavern, OneNote is basically a big old folder that's done electronic. These are your different tabs. This one is kind of my miscellaneous notebook where I just kind of stuff things. For an example of a playable notebook, I've got this one, which I've got like working files, my different ways to do combat encounters, the 36 dramatic situations, different stuff like that that I think are useful to me. Now, this looks like a lot, and to be honest, I don't ever use all of it. I kind of use it more as, oops, let me move that because that's actually for a future game there. I kind of use it more as a guide to kind of point my thoughts in the right direction. So some of the stuff like the building a plot guideline here, I may not use absolutely everything that's on here, but I'll probably look at it at least for reference to kind of think about, okay, how do I want to do this? How do I want to do that? I've also got some links inside here about where these YouTube videos for the Your GM Academy did videos on it, and this basic notebook was designed around their stuff there. So I kind of helped out with that. I've shared it to the brigade and the one-shot group before. At the end of this video, I will share a link to this as well because it has been kind of popular. And so if you guys ever want to look for it, it'll be in here. All right, so let's go along here. So this is one of the ones I wanted to show you. This is kind of typically how I will do it. This Ironthal is a settlement, and then I've got basically what its purpose is, town size, atmosphere, and things like that. The cool thing about this is I've got these little bullet points, and I go, okay, if they're going through the Iron Gate, it's going to be a noisy hub of merchants and smith, feels gritty, and dust freely floats on the air. So it kind of gives me this, just a quick feeling of how it should always feel all the time. The fact that I've mentioned that gritty dust floats freely through the air, that kind of gives you a feeling, and I may say something like one of the characters has like a sneezing attack at the area or something fun like that, just to kind of reinforce that theme. And I think having these tools about kind of really helps that. And then I go into stuff about like how the government and stuff like that works, different commerce things, because I always have players that ask me about, oh, I don't like this weaponsmith, can I go to another one? So I know that I have 6 weaponsmiths in town. And then I go through like currency, different stuff like this. This was done with the DMG, how they say to build a settlement. And we'll actually go over building a settlement as we build stuff to play. This one was built for kind of generic D&D, and I actually really liked it. So I may end up changing Ironthal to something that I can use for something else. I've got important NPCs here, important sites. And then for fun, I actually did up a little heraldry piece here. Looks like it was done with mytribe101.com. If you're interested in doing something like this, it was super easy. I just picked out what I wanted the shield to look like, threw an animal on there, and then gave it a quote. And I named it, at the time I was looking at Valenford. I think I ended up changing it to Ironheart afterward, but the Valenfort I decided to keep with the ruling family. And so this is actually their crest, which Apparently I named them Valenfort and then Valenford here. So I'll probably end up changing my notes here. But once I did that, I kind of broke down my families and then the council. And you can see that there's not a whole lot of work done in here just yet, but here's one of the factions, the Tunnel Rats. It's a criminal organization. And then I kind of talk about what they do, what their typical quests are. And then I just kind of went into a little bit of information about who and what they are or what they do. This little stat block I've got over here, I was using a Pathfinder supplement called The Five Families about building criminal organizations in your game, and I kind of wanted to try the mechanics, so I just did a quick little write-up following their guidelines. I don't know that I'm necessarily going to keep it, but it does give you kind of a baseline of what that organization should be able to do, in the same way that building a character does. You basically build your organization like you would build a character. This is all nice and all, but it doesn't really have anything to do with our current conversation. So we're going to kind of leave this here. I just kind of wanted to give you a brief overview of what OneNote is in case you did miss that. And this is a little bit more detailed than what I did with the GM Academy, just because I didn't want to take up too much time from everybody else. Let's go ahead and go back to my generic book here. All right, so right here what we have are a couple images. This is the original image we found right here with the 4 different bird people that I thought was really cool because it gave me this idea that I wanted to be more focused on sub races. And then when I was looking, I found this other one right here, and that kind of led me down another path. These guys have kind of the same attire on, so it feels like they're from the same tribe. Maybe they just look different. They've all got these little tusks here. I don't think I'm going to keep the tusks, to be honest, as part of them, but I really like having the imagery as source files. I think I like this image a little better for just a generic appearance where it's more of a traditional bird-like appearance. Plus this one's a full drawing, not a quick sketch like these are. Quick sketches, you can tell because of the muddy colored background where it's not so detailed, and you can see like certain limbs are kind of faded to the back. I love the look of quick sketches, so for me, this is usually where I draw inspiration. It kind of looks like concept art, and that's what I use it for. I generally tend to stay away from this stuff until I build a character, and even sometimes I still stick with concept art. It's just my personal preference. You guys don't have to stick with that at all. But so for the DMG, let me go ahead and pull it up here. It is the 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons Game Master or Dungeon Master's Guide. On page 285, they talk about creating new character options, and the first thing they bring up is creating a race. They tell you to ask several questions, and that's what this highlighted section is. Let's go ahead and play with this a little bit here. I'm going to increase its font size to something that should be a lot easier for you guys to read. In fact, let me just increase all of my font size. Go to 20. Let me see how that looks on the screen here. That looks a little better. Just for ease of viewing, I'm going to kick it up another notch here. So open this up a little bit more. So for this section, these are the questions that the Dungeon Master's Guide actually puts out for you, and I have some typos in here. Unfortunately, the only downside I've found to OneNote is that it does not pay attention to spell check or content check to make sure that your grammar is correct either. Just keep that in mind because you'll probably see me making typos. I probably rely on spell check more than I really should. I grew up in California, and that's my downfall. Anyways, so these are the questions they tell you to ask. What does my campaign need the race to be or why does my campaign need the race to be playable is what this should be. What does the race look like? How would I describe the race's culture? Where do members of the race live? Are there interesting conflicts built into the race's history and culture that make the race compelling from a story standpoint or storytelling standpoint? What is the race's relationship to the other playable races? What is the race's signature traits in the case of a new subrace? What sets them apart from other subraces of the parent race? So with this bird race, we originally dictated that they were going to be our beautiful race. And what I like is if you look at the elves, which are traditionally the beautiful race in in D&D, they have the core elf stats, and then they go into this little section that basically says because their cultural differences, they divided themselves so strongly that you have to pick a subrace, and that kind of defines who you are as an elf. You have that baseline common ancestor, if you will, and then you have where you've evolved to, speaking about like evolutionary theory compared to game theory. So I liked that concept, and so that's what I'm going to go with this, is I'm going to create a baseline Garuda or Birdman, and from there I'm going to build subraces and basically make subraces mandatory. So I've got some basic goals for the Garuda. If you look inside the Dungeon Master's Guide, they talk about building the Aasimar, which is a dichotomy to the Tiefling. Honestly, I think that was a bad choice for an example to build the race, because they built a race that was 100% based on being a polar opposite of another race that's inside the book. I think what would have been a better choice to kind of explain their process would have been something like the Warforged, where it's very different than what else is inside there. But they don't want to make fans happy, and instead we're going to have to wait for Eberron books to come out before Warforged get available for people. And I know that's one of the more popular races, so that kind of bums me out to see. So following the guidelines that they have there, they talk about making some basic goals, and I kind of went into this larger section here. And the first thing that I decided is I like that they basically outlined that the Aasimar should be good at being, let me see here, cut the Dungeon Master's Guide in a different place. It looks like the Aasimar should be effective clerics and paladins, and they also mentioned that the Aasimar should be what celestials and human, or should be to celestials and humans what tieflings are to fiends and humans. And that's kind of a broad terms stance of saying that they should feel kind of out of place amongst them, just whether it's a good or negative, or positive or negative thing, that they should feel kind of out of place. So following that kind of basic premise, I probably went into more basic goals than necessary. I would say at least 3 bullet points is probably good. If you're basing your race off of something that already exists, kind of like the Aasimar to the Tiefling, you could probably get away with 2 bullet points like they do. So for this one, I wanted to say that they would be effective bards and sorcerers. I have this idea because they're bird people, that they're going to be more charismatic, in almost like a high culture charismatic way. I forget which edition of D&D there was, but there was an elf besides the drow that was a good elf, if you would, that was very charismatic based, and I want to say they were like gray elves. I could be wrong. But essentially they were a charismatic race, and they were very like self-centered. They focused on their own projects, but they were always about exuding beauty to people around them, and they would kind of lead, and they would always put themselves on a pedestal, at least for how they looked and things like that. And that's how I kind of feel like these birdmen should be. Just because I'm looking at them, and there's actually some interesting qualities that come forward when you start thinking about birds, because birds are into preening themselves, presenting themselves. If you've ever noticed any sort of nature shows or anything like that, that when birds go into like mating season, they always they peacock is kind of the term that goes around, at least that's what you call it when humans do it. Essentially, they preen, prep themselves, and they make themselves look better all the time. And because of this natural charisma, I thought that would be a good thing to play forward. So bards and primal magic, I kind of came to that conclusion as I was doing this, because I liked the idea of them being more nature related, but not in a way that the elves are, where they're kind of directly tied to nature. I want to make them drawn to nature. So sorcerer seemed like a good way to go, because it's natural, but it's still unnatural at the same time, having this arcane magic. So we're going with bards and sorcerers as what they're good at, which are both charisma related things. So that'll probably be their strong stat. Most races have a strong stat and then a weak stat. I'm calling it that because usually what it is you get a +2 in one stat, a +1 in another stat, or something similar to that. It kind of depends on your racial abilities. Once we start building, we're going to have to build kind of a baseline and see how it balances against the other races. for which I'm going to use the core races to see how it balances against them, just for mechanical reasons. All right, so next, let's take a look here. I mentioned that they should be the beautiful race, focused on art, culture, and beauty. And this is where I was talking about that I want them from the natural world, similar in attitude to elves, but more primal beauty and no Fae inspiration. I have this idea that I want the Fae to be kind of an evil source in the world, kind of more like they were in older European stories where like sprites and pixies and things like that were evil. They would steal children, things like that. And I think I want to play up that darker Fae aspect inside the world. So I don't want them to necessarily be related to the Fae. And in fact, we'll kind of go into that a little bit more as we go along here. I want to keep them extremely long-lived, just because I was thinking about it and I thought about making them actually very short-lived, like shorter than humans, but I decided that would make them too flighty to kind of make a joke there. I like the idea of them being long-lived and having more of a more of an attitude of being able to take their time with things, kind of like you see with elves. So I decided to keep that. Basically, why they're needed. The campaign needs the race to fill a cultural space left open by the omission of the standard beautiful race, which is elves, of course. What do they look like? They look like birds seen in the images above. They're very divided. For sub-races, we're going to have a predatorial or raptor bird, tropical birds, and civilized birds. I haven't decided what exactly civilized birds means. I mean, it could be something as simple as having like pigeon people, seagulls, swallows, things like that. Or it could be something like owls. I haven't quite decided on their appearances, what each one's going to be. I mean, tropical birds and raptors kind of have a distinct look to them. For anybody who doesn't know, a hawk is a raptor. Like this one would be more of a raptor look, whereas this one and this one here, these blue ones, would be more of a tropical look. I'm thinking that this is probably good imagery for a more civilized one, but he does kind of have more raptor features when you look at his face, that hooked beak and everything. All right, so let's see. The culture is one placing value in art and beauty above most things, drawn to beautiful nature of things and what could be produced and manufactured. Unlike the elves, where they would typically lean a little bit more towards the natural beauty and things growing in their natural way, I wanted the Garuda to be more interested in manufacturing what could be produced from it, kind of an aspect that I take from the dwarves. This idea that craftsmanship should be important to them, and that kind of falls back into their idea that art and beauty go hand in hand. So this is one thing that I wanted to play up because I wanted to give them kind of a cultural aspect that's relatively easy for players to catch on to. So birds, the term flighty kind of comes from them. They tend to get interested in something and then they will change their mind completely. So the idea is they're a curious race and will find a singular study of immense interest for years at a time before changing their mind to do something completely different. So basically, if they get transfixed on something, they will typically focus on that for years at a time, and then out of nowhere, they'll just change their mind and go do something else, which actually makes them kind of fun for a playable race, because you could start off your adventure with your character being dead set on this one goal, and then it would be completely within your character because of your racial understanding to change your goal halfway through the game and be like, oh, I need to do this instead. And it would totally work and be fine, which is nice with adventuring groups, because typically that's how a game goes naturally. So this is kind of a story reason as to why your Birdman would be interested in that sort of thing. So I like the idea that came from elves, that they're slow to make friends due to their long lifespans, but extremely loyal once befriended. I wanted to keep that with the birds, just because I think longer lifespan people, it's part of the reason they're standoffish and it takes them longer to become friends is because, you know, it's hard to see your friends die, is kind of the best way to put it. So I thought about that and I was like, you know, that's probably the best way to go, is to keep them like that. Now, I looked at this and I decided that I wanted to kind of break them up as far as their cultural habitats and things like that. The standard Garuda live in vast forest cities, and I'm thinking they're going to be more spread out. Whereas if you see like the elven cities and stuff like that, they're pretty much a city that is hidden inside trees. I'm thinking more like in Star Wars, the Ewok city, where it was spread out far between trees, and like each tree only had a house on it. Something similar to that. Now, um, the raptors, I decided, would prefer mountains and plains. The civilized ones, of course, would go towards cities, especially human-sending cities as a never-ending point of curiosity, because humans are so short-lived that they do interesting things. The tropical ones, I was going to put them more of jungles and lush environments, just because it's easy to grasp on, and there's no need to make everything so distant and change everything. So I wanted to give them kind of their aspects through cultural. Since I haven't defined the other races yet, I wanted to put one race in here as to who they relate to. So they have a cultural conflict with the Nerian, which is the conservative tough guy. That's our kind of aquatic fish people. I think that's going to come from the idea of birds and fish, whereas the Nerian will be more standoffish. Because of the Nerian's nature, I think that's what's going to put the strain on the relationship with them, not necessarily the Garuda's nature. It's something similar to the way elves and dwarves are, that their societies are just going to be really different, and that they'll be in a natural conflict with each other. I'm also giving them a long-standing racial hatred of evil plants and fae as corruptors of the natural way. So what got me thinking about this is I've got a god that is nature and the moon, and is kind of an evil god in the world. And so I kind of wanted to play that up a little bit more, and so I wanted to have fae be these dark creatures, and kind of like dwarves get racial hatred on giants. I thought that would be kind of a cool thing to put inside here for my beauty races, that they would just have this hatred of the corruptors of natural magic, the natural way of the world. So the last thing I wanted to put on here was no flight. So this is the reason why I am not using the Aarakocra. Flight is a very strong advantage, especially for a level 1 character, to just naturally be able to fly. So I've decided to leave it off, at least for now. If I decide that it's something that can cope and make sense in my world, I may change that, but for now, that's what we're going to keep it at. And so from here, you guys can see that I just kind of outlined what each thing is supposed to go over. So kind of like how the elves are set up, I've got my Garuda traits, and then I've got my civilized birds, tropical birds, and raptor birds. That's where I was talking about. It was going to get pretty generic pretty quick. So for this, we're going to just kind of talk about baselining things. So for my ability scores, I've decided I want them to be charismatic, and that's going to be something that is pertinent through all of their races. So I think I'm going to do +2 to charisma for their baseline, who they are. I'm looking at elves, like I said, and I'll probably touch on dwarves as well, as far as a reference point inside the book on how to build this. So if you look at elves, they get +2 to dexterity scores. That's where I'm kind of going with this one. So for age, I'm thinking that they should live. For now, I'm going to say 500 to 750. I don't know if I want them to be the longest lived race or not, but that just kind of gives me a baseline of what I'm looking at just in general. For general alignment, so everybody knows about the 9 different alignments. If you don't, they're in the player's handbook, and they kind of go over what each one does. I'm thinking, due to their kind of chaotic nature and the fact that they get fixated and then they change their minds, that they should definitely be chaotic. And I'm almost thinking that they should be neutral, actually, because just the fact that they're so long-lived. But if you look at 5th edition, they don't really outline that so much. Like the elf entry basically says that they lean towards the gentler aspects of chaos, and they value protection. Then they talk about drow being the exception and what they're leaned more towards. So I'm gonna put leaning more toward chaos. Now, this, like I said, is going to be a outline basically, and I will have a full written up one once I solidify it and balance it against the other classes, or the races rather, on the blog. So for now, just this is bullet points. So for speed, I'm sorry, it looks like I missed one. Size. For size, I'm thinking I want them shorter than humans, because they've got this kind of like a bird-like leg appendage here, which I've kind of kept inside all my imagery. I'm thinking that if they could stand taller, they would be much taller, but I think just because of the way their leg shape is, they're going to sit a little shorter than average humans are. So let's say that they're about from 5 feet to just under 6, I think. And I'm going to say they have broad build, but lightweight. And that's going to be kind of a reference back to birds having hollow bones. So I'm thinking that that maybe they have kind of this broader aspect to them, kind of like our images at the top there. But maybe their weight doesn't quite calculate the same way humans do. So maybe they have like 3/4 the weight that a human would at a similar height or something like that. So for speed, I'm thinking that the base speed should be 30 feet. That's pretty average for most any race. Let's see here, and vision. I've decided that I want to go dark vision. The reason for that is I've got raptors on the list, and I've got some civilized birds and these tropical birds here. The civilized birds, when I think about the birds that would be around the city, a lot of them are not nocturnal. So maybe actually, because the tropical birds wouldn't be nocturnal either, maybe they just have normal vision, and maybe just the raptors have dark vision. But I'm curious how that would work out, because if you look at the elves, like drow have superior dark vision, but then they get light sensitivity as kind of their trade-off. Let me look at the dwarves and see here, because I believe all dwarves have dark vision as well. So I think for game balance, maybe it does make sense to give them just all dark vision, because I don't think there's anybody in the book that really splits that. Like they have normal vision and then a subrace happens to have dark vision. So I'm thinking, yeah, for now we're going to go with dark vision. I'm just taking a look here to make sure that I'm correct in thinking that there isn't anything like that. Yeah, it looks like it, and especially since they got rid of the idea of low light vision. Had that been kept in the series, that might have been a better answer. And then dark vision just for the raptors, but I think for now we'll just keep it as dark vision for all of them. All right, so this section I kind of labeled as special abilities or special qualities. I called it later on. This is essentially like using our elf entry as an example. This is where you get into stuff like keen senses, their fey ancestry, the trance, and then it goes into languages and subrace after that. So I like the idea of keen senses. Birds typically are the first to notice any sort of danger. So I'm thinking that proficiency in perception would probably work out pretty well for that. Type here. We go, proficiency in perception. Let's see here. Fae ancestry doesn't make sense because, like I said, I want them to be detached from Fae. But let's look at it as to what it actually does. It looks like it provides an advantage on a saving throw against charm magic, and you can't be put to sleep. Which I think relates to their next special quality for elves, which is the fact that they use trance. They don't really have a need to go to sleep. Since that doesn't really apply to the bird, we're not going to worry about that. Instead, I'm going to think about something that would be a little bit more appropriate for my specific race here. A lot of races do typically have that sort of ability that they may have some sort of advantage very situationally built in. For example, Dwarven Resilience gives you advantage against poisons, and you have resistance against poison damage. So that's a pretty common thing to see some sort of resistance built in. Let me think here. So right now you guys can't really see it, but essentially I'm just kind of going through the player's handbook, looking at the other races, what they have comparably to see what sounds pretty good here. Because a lot of these races are actually going to be gone, so using some of their abilities wouldn't necessarily be a bad idea at all. So there is one that I do like from the half-orc is called Menacing. Basically, they gain proficiency and intimidation as a skill. We've already got Keen Sense on here. I think I'm going to add this as an alternate because I might do something a little bit different. I may give them, call it social and proficiency in, say, what social skills should they have? Let's take a look at the list here. I'm thinking persuasion would probably do fine. Yeah, that's probably the best one. So these two are going to actually be a choice here that I'll make up as we go. Actually, you know what? I think what I'll do is I will keep this as an option, but I'm not going to put it here. I think the civilized birds would actually benefit from that better. Maybe they get persuasion instead of perception. Don't want to do flight because, like I said, I feel like that's a little too powerful. But I like the idea of very situationally based save. So let me look at some conditions here. Which, for anybody following along, conditions are Appendix A in the player's handbook. I'm thinking maybe a resistance to charms would be kind of a neat idea. However, it is kind of counterintuitive to birds. Keeping them in mind is kind of our influence point here, because birds, shiny objects, really, to be honest. So maybe that's not the best idea. I'll have to think about it. For now, we're just kind of leave it blank for a little bit here. For languages, we'll say Garuda and Common, just to kind of knock those two out. And the sub races for ability scores for our civilized birds, I know I want them to have the not charisma, but I want to give them something that fits for them. So for that, we're going to go with +1, and I'm thinking, let's see here, because they'd be a little bit more civilized. I'm thinking maybe maybe wisdom. Actually, no. I think, yeah, actually, I like having wisdom there because they're going to be a little bit more curious and more studied individuals. Actually, intelligence would probably be best now that I'm kind of walking through this here. Then for their special qualities, put instead of keen senses. So this is what I was kind of thinking is maybe these civilized birds, because they've been in cities so long, that maybe they get proficiency in persuasion instead of the keen senses ability, which is perception as what their natural proficiency is. Just to kind of distinguish where their influence is. Let's see, for tropical birds, I think maybe these should be our wisdom-based ones. And for our raptors, just because I'll kind of knock these out right away before I get too lost in everything else, I'm thinking maybe a dex bonus. So the reason for the idea of a dex bonus is if you look at raptors, they're predatory animals. They are typically strong, but they're also faster. So I'm thinking dex would probably be the best option. Strength would be kind of my secondary choice. If anybody has any direct opinions about it, wants to share that, you can definitely let me know about what you think it should be. Again, this is kind of like the previous videos. We are kind of working our way through it and seeing what we can build. And if I don't get this all finished right now, it's not a big deal. What I can do is kind of knock out the baseline stuff and then move forward. Just like everything else, it's kind of working with things to see what you like, what you don't like, and changing things as you go. Again, back to that painting reference we talked about at the very beginning. It's putting paint on the canvas, something to work with. So let's go back to our elf entry. So high elves, they get the intelligence bump, and then they get a weapon training, and they get a cantrip along with an extra language. So for these civilized birds, I actually really like the idea of an extra language. So let's keep that in there. And I don't know if I want a cantrip inside there. Let me take a look at dwarves, because there is some stuff from the dwarves that I liked. Actually, going back to the main race, that's what I was looking at. So a racial thing. So let's see here. So they kind of got rid of something that was available in Pathfinder and in previous D&D type games, the racial advantage to combat that dwarves used to have against giants. So now it's more of an RP thing that you are you just have this racial hatred. And of course, some game masters still play that up, saying that you've developed tactics, special weapons, and things like that. And I think that kind of goes to their combat training. If you look at it in 5th edition, they talk about that they're proficient with the battle axe, the hand axe, the throwing hammer, the war hammer. Given the size of the bird people, I don't know that those would necessarily be the best options. But let me just put in here Fey Hunter. That's what I want to flavor it as. And I'll think more about what I want that to be, but probably some sort of weapon proficiencies, or maybe something else. We talked about them being art focused, so the dwarves happen to have tool proficiencies. I like that, so not tool proficiencies. We're going to include those inside there, similar to the way that the dwarves get it, where they get a choice of kits. For now, I'm just going to put artisan's kit, which they may have actually broken that down a little bit deeper in 5th edition. I don't quite recall, but we'll kind of go into that a little bit more. And then because I want them to be more nature focused as a whole race, what I'm thinking is, let's see here. They've got stone cutting, which is intelligence history. They get to add double their proficiency instead of normal proficiency, which is kind of their equivalent to keen senses. So that doesn't really make a lot of sense. So maybe I will also add herbalism kit to the options here. I'll probably pick out probably 2 more kits that fit, but that kind of gives me a good baseline. This doesn't feel like it's too far out of bounds with the rest of it, of the races. In fact, it's probably a little bit weaker right now, but I think that that's a good place to start. So civilized birds, we've decided that we want the ability score increase, the social aspect, the extra language, and I'll have to decide on something else because they should definitely have something extra. Filler here for now. The tropical birds, I'm going to skip them for now because I feel like they're kind of my middle ground and I'm probably the weakest with them. The raptors, so I like wood elves a lot from the book. I think that they're kind of cool. They get for wood elves, they get the wisdom and dexterity combo, which for them makes them kind of a cool warrior race. And that's where I was kind of going with this idea of like, naturally they're going to have the higher charisma, but dexterity to go towards more of like a warrior aspect, which is why I was saying maybe strength would be a secondary option. So I'm just going to put that here, dex/strength. That way I don't forget about this later. I want them to have special weapon training. I don't know what that's going to mean, but I think they should have extra weapon training or something like that. Maybe an armor training, kind of like the dwarves do. Probably not to the extreme that the dwarves do, but definitely something extra for them. Take a look here. I love fleet of foot, so put that on there, which makes sense with the idea of raptors being fast. So 35 feet pace. Easy enough. And let's see, Mask of the Wild allows them to hide. Since they're, let's see, when they're lightly obscured by foliage, heavy rain, falling snow, mist, and other natural phenomenon. Since they're raptor, I don't know that that's necessarily going to be the best option. I think maybe something along the lines of I think it's the gnomes who get like a rock sense or something like that, where they get to hide better around rocks or rough terrain rather. Let me see here. I guess it's not them. I don't know. I think stealth is kind of cool, but I don't know if that necessarily should be what I'm going for. At least with the raptors as a whole. Let's see here. Hmm. You know what I like? I like Speak with Beasts. Let's go ahead and put that, actually not for the raptors, but for the tropical birds. That is actually a gnome quality. But I like the idea of it. The tropical birds already have kind of more of a druid feel to them. So maybe or cleric rather, but maybe Speak with Small Beasts would be a good option. Again, please don't like beat me up too hard in the comments. I'm pretty terrible at typing, and this takes me a while usually, but kind of bear with me here. Just put a note in here that comes from gnomes. Basically, what that does is through sounds and gestures, you can communicate with simple ideas with small or smaller beasts. It talks about forest gnomes love animals, often keeping a squirrel, badger, rabbits, moles, woodpeckers, and other creatures as beloved pets. I like that idea, so I wanted to kind of stick with that, just to kind of keep it another option on there. I'm thinking because I'm taking away the idea for the raptors here, since I'm looking at the wood elves so much for kind of the inspiration. I think because I'm taking out the stealth that they get, the armor training probably is going to fit in to be a better option anyways, just to kind of have them match up. For the tropical birds, I'm thinking they should have some sort of built-in magic, so I'm going to put tropical magic here. I'm not going to define that for now. I have the idea that maybe something simple like a cantrip and maybe a 3rd level spell or a 1st level spell, something in there, like the lower end magic, like once per day or something like that wouldn't be such a bad option. Or I'll have to take a look at it as far as what's going to be good and what I can balance it off of. But for now, that's going to be kind of a good option. Let's see here. I'm thinking for the civilized birds, maybe Lucky, which is a halfling thing. I've decided I'm going to have halflings in there, so I don't necessarily want to steal something from them since they're going to be inside the world anyways. So maybe that's not a good option. For now, let's go ahead and keep it like that. That's kind of my rough outline as far as what this race is, what their part in culture is, and everything. If you guys have any future input or anything like that, let me know. We've been going for 45 minutes, so I think that's probably well enough time. In the future, when I do videos on races, they're not going to be as detailed as this. What I'll probably do is work out my outline, give you guys a quick rundown of it, and I'll show you kind of my work in progress, or my work in progress file. So let's go ahead and label that here, work in progress. Again, we kind of talked about the different options as far as different races and things like that goes. If you guys want to check out that racial video and let me know what you are interested in, I have a player who has enjoyed playing a rhino person for the longest time. He wanted to play one and was allowed to, and had a great story about his character, who was the only one in the world. And I was thinking that maybe I would include some rhino people. There's actually a very good one that's online. Let me stop sharing here. There's actually a very good one that's online from, let me see here. Trying to remember what his name on Facebook is. It should be Heath, but I don't recall his last name now. Well, I'll find it and add it to the comment section here. But Heath has on his blog some savage races. He's got a rhino race inside there. My only hesitation to it is that it's large. 5th edition large creatures kind of change things. Weapons get quite a bit more deadly. Reach gets involved and things like that. I'm about to play a game on Friday where I will be playing a half giant, and the half giant does happen to be large. So I think what I'm going to do is use that as a proving ground for large creatures and see how they work out. See if it's something that I think it should be playable by my game and how it stacks up. If not, what I'll probably do is kind of label them more off of the Minotaur, which is so cool. If you haven't had a chance to check that out, it's part of the Unearthed Arcana. They have the Maritime Edition, I guess is how to call it, or what to call it, rather. So definitely check that out if that's the case. If you haven't seen the Minotaur stuff yet, it's super cool and worth taking a look at. They got a new fighting style and everything in there. I mentioned it in my last video about that one, but so let me know what you guys think. Right now, I'm looking over the races that we've kind of looked at, and I feel like we have a lot of animal hybrid things going on, and so I will probably limit it. I'm thinking I want to do the rhinos because that's something that Jeremy had going for a while, and I think that having them in the world as like a viable race and actually be something in the world, I think I'm going to talk to him and get his input and have him help me build the race, at least the guidelines of it for the world. And we can talk about that some more. Just taking a look here. I did pick up an image of a fawn creature, which I was thinking maybe I could have some sort of half fae. I've already talked about doing a hag, which is still kind of fae related, which I may turn them into a non-playable race. I have to decide what I want to do. I like the idea of them being a playable race and being cursed, and kind of like, to a lesser extent, the social stigmas that come with a warlock on a hag. But I'll have to play and look at it and see what I like. Another interesting photo I found was one with a gorilla, like an intelligent gorilla who's enslaved like a rock golem and is riding around as a mount. I thought that was kind of funny. I don't think I'm going to use that, but that was added to my racial pictures here. I definitely like the kind of aquatic maritime people that we saw, the Nereians. They, to me, feel more mermaid-like than they do necessarily like fish people. So I think I'm probably going to keep them around. And that's pretty much where I'm at right now. I'll have to work with it, and like I've said previously, the video series is kind of about working through the whole process. Once it comes to the point that I've got the stuff worked out, you'll start to see entries on the blog about it. I recently did one talking about making the campsite more important. I did that for Savage Worlds, and I decided to revamp it for 5th edition. And you'll probably see another entry from me pretty soon about gear quality and gear maintenance. I don't know why I really like that aspect. I'm usually not a very simulationist GM, but I do like the idea of gear quality on a very simple tracking scale. In one of my video responses, I talked about doing a shield with quality and having the shield uses be for deflection in the game. If you haven't checked that out, it was a Community Saturday video I did. I don't recall what I called it, but I will put a link inside here, which was a lot of fun, actually. The O5R Dungeons and Dragons video, which I really like the idea of the way I made shields work inside there. So that's probably something I'm going to carry over to this game, and we'll probably start talking world rules, kind of like your campaign optional rules and things like that. We'll talk about what's going to be the rules of the world for Flood World or Stratmur. So for everybody who's been paying attention, thank you. I'll have more racial videos as I kind of put things together. This one was kind of quickly done. Unfortunately, like I said, I had some family business this week, so I had to pay attention to that, and it kind of limited my free time. So next week, what we'll probably end up talking about is if I get the Garuda more worked out, we'll probably touch on them a little bit more, but I may bust out another one of the races and talk about them and how I want them to be. I'm probably going to use humans as baseline, but we may change around some of the stuff about halflings. So I'm going to take a look at them, see if I need to do any sort of sub races, and if I need to do a sub race, we'll build a sub race and see how that works. All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you at the gaming table.